Welcome. Welcome to the Initiative on Catholic Social Thought Dialogue, the Initiative on Catholic Social Thought and Public Life Dialogue on whatever happened to the common good, divided by COVID, torn apart by politics, fractured by faith. We're delighted you've joined us. Many people have. I looked a few minutes ago, we almost had 1,900 people signed up. This is our last gathering of a challenging year. And what we found is this topic and others like it are really important people. There's a hunger for civil dialogue and for a focus on the principles of Catholic social teaching. We've done in this long, challenging year, we've done 20 of these, and we've reached more than 50,000 people and almost 2,000 today. We encourage all those watching to share your thoughts on social media, hashtag GU Common Good, and you can submit questions to the panelists using the email on the bottom of the screen. This particular dialogue is focused on the neglected principle of the common good. We want to look at how it's been undermined in political combat and religious divisions, and even in our response to COVID-19. We want to look for ways to advance the common good and examine how religious faith has contributed to the problem and might, in fact, help lift up the common good. 4 days ago in Athens, literally the birthplace of democracy, Pope Francis warned, "We are witnessing a retreat from democracy, a skepticism about democracy. The remedy is good politics. For politics is and ought to be in practice a good thing, the art of the common good, so that the good can be truly shared, and particular attention, I would even say a priority, should be given to the weaker parts of society. This is the direction to take," is what Pope Francis said. Well, this is not the direction our nation is taking. That's not the path we're on. Even the pandemic has been a source of division. How serious it is, what we ought to do about it. We're still fighting over who won the last election. We're investigating an insurrection. Congress can't agree on much of anything, not even a debt ceiling, apparently. This has been a year of intense conflict over racial justice in our history. We're still fighting over refugees and immigration. We're not taking the steps we need on climate. And frankly, our church, our family of faith, has been hampered by our divisions. Our mission, our ministries, our witness has been compromised. In many cases, narrow interests are prevailing over the common goals. Now, the common good can be the basis for consensus, unity, and progress. It can lead to needed sacrifice of some of our own interests to advance the broader good. But it can also be an excuse for watering down principle or avoiding hard choices. Some of our friends on both the left and the right say that the search for the common good can become an excuse for abandoning fundamental principles or for avoiding tough choices on human life or environmental justice, economic justice, racial justice. We're going to explore these challenges with 4 outstanding leaders. Senior member of Congress, Marcy Kaptur, is joining us. Political analyst and advisor who has worked for both Democrats and Republicans and is now running for office. A sociologist who study what unites and divides us, and the new president of the College of the Holy Cross. Let me introduce them each. Tricia Bruce is a sociologist and author. She's done a number of groundbreaking reports, including Parish and Place, Making Room for Diversity in the Catholic Church, and a major study and new book, Our Lives, What Americans Really Think About Abortion. Matthew Dowd was the chief strategist for the 2004 Bush campaign and was an ABC News political analyst. Before working for President Bush, he worked for both Democrats and Republicans. He's written 2 books, Revelations on the River, Healing a Nation, Healing Ourselves, and A New Way, Embracing the Paradox as We Live and Lead and Serve. And he's recently announced he's running for lieutenant governor in Texas. Marcy Kaptur is the longest serving woman in the history of the U.S. House of Representatives. She represents Ohio's 9th District, and she's been a leader in the Congress and an example of working together across party lines. Vincent Rougeot is the new president of the College of the Holy Cross in Worcester. He is its first lay president. It's first Black president, and he comes to Holy Cross from serving as dean of the Boston College School of Law, and he has authored Christians in the American Empire, Faith and Citizenship in the New World Order. I want to thank all of you for joining us. And let me begin by asking each of you for a brief opening comment. Has our nation lost a sense of the common good? And if so, what is this costing us? Let me turn to you first, Matt.
Well, thanks. It's great to be with y'all. It's a pleasure to be part of this, which I think is an incredibly important conversation that we're having that we need to have. I think the short answer to that question is yes. We have lost a sense of the common good in our country at this point in time. I think it's incredibly dangerous that we have, because democracies can only function if we have an ability to get to the common good. If you don't have an ability to get to the common good, you no longer have an ability to have a democracy. And I think that's the point in time we are here in America today, that I think our democracy is incredibly fragile and is at a really incredibly dangerous precipice where we are. I see democracy as a gift and not as a given. And the ability to get to the common good is not something that you can just assume. It takes, as you mentioned, it takes sacrifices, it takes struggle, and it takes the ability to put your own self-interest secondarily to the interest of the general public or the common good in this. I would also say this is not unique in American history. At this time, I think all of us operate in the moment we're in as if it's only happened in this moment. It's happened in our history before. And matter of fact, I think it happens every 70 or 80 years in our country's history. We go through this struggle in this moment. It happened 70 or 80 years ago before now, in the midst of the run-up to the Great Depression and World War II. It happened 70 or 80 years ago before that in the Civil War, and it happened 70, 80 years ago before that in the Revolutionary War. So yeah, I'm very concerned, and I do think we have lost a sense of the common good, but I would also distinguish between where the public is and where our leaders are. And I think those are two different things. Where it's definitely been lost among our leaders, I think the public still strives for it.
Thanks, Matt. We'll explore that this hour. Tricia, you're a social scientist. Has our nation lost a sense of the common good? And if so, what is it costing us?
I believe that we're sharpening our questions and definitions regarding what is common and what is good. And I think that this kind of sharpening or this reckoning has been challenging and even painful, and as personal as it is political. I think there's a certain simplicity and convenience that comes with glossing over the dynamics of difference under the banner of laudable notions like patriotism, community, individualism, freedom, and religion, and Catholicism in particular, is quite good at this, and thereby implicated in it, championing a spirit of togetherness without attentiveness to power, inequality, dissent, or even abuse therein. The good news, of course, because when we talk about religion, we want good news, right? Is that sharpening our understanding of what is common and what is good promises a more radical and honest inclusivity that can actually move us closer to the laudable goals to which both religion and politics aspire. I'd like to think that I'm here to remind us that sociology plays an important role in this, that dialoguing around the common good is predicated upon asking hard questions and gathering sound data to answer them, surfacing empirical truths as a means of correcting misunderstandings, and identifying shared ground towards fulfilling pathways into the future. And I'm grateful to be a part of this dialogue today. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Vince, you've spent your whole life in higher education, it seems, Jesuit, Catholic. Have we lost a sense of the common good? And if so, what are its costs?
Thanks for having me. And yes, I would echo many of the things that Matthew said and what Tricia has also said in terms of the short answer to the question is yes, and it's extremely dangerous. I believe our democracy is at real risk, but it's also at a pivot point. And part of this is a reassessment of who we are. And if we're going to talk about the common good, we're going to have to honestly assess why we're having this moment in our history where there is so much division and dissension. I do think that there is a lot of good work being done in support of the common good, typically in local communities and where people are trying to reclaim a sense of the common. But I think as we work up the leadership chain, we see more and more retreat, more and more division, more and more of a sense of a winner-take-all politics that is then, coming back down and encouraging behaviors that are very destructive. We need to see leaders in Congress and in our states, governors and legislatures, who understand that they have a responsibility to the nation and to they're supposed to be exercising certain values as leaders that promote our notions of the common good, values like shared sacrifice, values like compromise, values like goodwill. So if we don't see that happening, we're going to be rushing headlong, I think, into a real disaster in terms of the future of our democracy.
Thank you, Vince. Marcy, welcome. I know you're just off an airplane. Vince was talking about rushing headlong into things. You're rushing into our dialogue, and we're very grateful. At the beginning, I was just asking people, do you think we've lost a sense of the common ground? And if so, what are its costs?
Boy, that's a hard question to begin with. It's great to see you, John, and these wonderful guests. And of course, free speech exists in America. And we're the oldest democratic republic on earth under this precious document, the U.S. Constitution, where the first three words are, we the people, and we the people still have a work in progress. So let me start there. We're the oldest democratic republic on the face of the earth, yet one of the earth's youngest nations. And in the last century, our forebears bequeathed to us liberty at a great cost. They had the triumph of liberty over tyranny. We know how to defeat tyranny. In our own country's history, if we think about some of the more difficult times we've had, such as in the 19th century, the Civil War remains our most costly war. Over 400,000 people died when we didn't have that many people in this country, fought over whether the economic system of the South would be extended west or not. And today we face a different set of challenges. My own view is, as a person of faith, that there are too many false gods that are among us, and we have to help our fellow citizens to see clearly. We have a great concentration of wealth, and the connection between the common good and the worker has been broken. In prior generations, companies assumed the burden of both pensions and healthcare benefits, for example. We have lived through a very rapacious period, I call it false gods, where in fact companies dumped their workers, and the government of the United States has had to pick up the casualties, and we still are. So there's reform due on the corporate front, in my opinion. In addition to that, in terms of media, we now are drenched with media just everywhere, 24 hours a day. Kids are holding these iPhones and whatever and seeing some very vulgar entries there. And there's more vulgarity in our society, and that media ownership also is concentrated in the hands of those who like sensationalism, a division, and conflict, because people watch conflict. Ask yourself the last time you saw anything on the news about a local barbershop where a lot of talk goes on and neighborhoods are held together, or a local diner where the owners come to work every day and people gather and they kind of talk about America. When was the last time you talked to the workers or saw a story about those who keep our nuclear reactors running in this country? These skilled people, right? That's not controversial. or the mother who helps a Girl Scout troop and isn't paid anything, right? You never see anybody on TV when they do good acts like that, or the father in the neighborhood who puts the softball team together, and those kids will never get publicity. So there's a problem with the media. I see your signal, a little signal there, but let me say there's also, with all this economic and media disruption, there's also been a change in family life with the breaking of generations, people moving apart in the country, and the roots aren't as deep in community. So we'll talk more, but thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Marcy. You hit the ground running. Let me turn to you, Vince, and try and go a little deeper. Marcy ended with family. And as I was reading about you, there was a lot about your academic career. You went to Brown, I think, Harvard, taught at Notre Dame, then Boston College. Now you're the president of Holy Cross. But all that began in Louisiana, in a loving, large Catholic family where you learn the values of faith and family and what Marcy was talking about. Help us understand. You in some ways are, Marcy laid the historical, the national framework, our Constitution. Help us think about the theological framework. Where does the common good come from? What does it entail? And how have we been pushing it aside as we dealt with COVID and racism and economics and media, as Congresswoman Kaptur said?
Well, I think I would start with a couple of basic principles, but as you mentioned, I mean, I learned a lot about this concept from my own growing up and living in my own family and taking those values that were passed down to me that come, from Catholic tradition, from Catholic social teaching. And two things I would focus on is first, the notion of community and how it relates to how we understand ourselves as individuals. And the second goes to how we think about rights. So on the notion of individual and community, in the Catholic social tradition, the individual exists in community. You cannot separate out the rights and the vision of the individual from that embeddedness in the life of a community, be it a family, be it a town, be it a faith community. There are so many different ways, but we are embedded individuals. We are not autonomous individuals. And I think it's very important for us, particularly for Americans who struggle mightily, I think, with the notion of an individual having some sort of untethered right to exist autonomously. And only in the most extreme cases should that right be compromised. And that gets me to the notion of rights. The Catholic social tradition, because we are so concerned with the notion of the individual coming into full understanding of his or her connection to God through the life and community, rights come with responsibilities. There is no right that does not exist with some balancing responsibility. So just because you have a right to do something doesn't mean that right is unfettered, doesn't mean that the right gives you the license to push it as far as you possibly can. It always has to be understood in context. And what we're seeing in this country is a loss of the ability for people to understand that, yes, they have rights, but those rights mean nothing if they don't exist within some kind of communal structure, government, family, etc., that balances those rights, because there are other people whose lives are engaged by your exercise of rights. So rights and responsibility, person within community, that's the foundation of how Catholic social teaching begins to understand the notion of the common good. And within communities, people need to have an ability to participate and to feel that they are truly meaningfully members. That's how we move to human dignity. So those are some basic concepts, and we can elaborate more as we go on. But I think without understanding those, and because I think we don't understand them, particularly as Catholics, well enough to really engage in our very divisive politics in a culture that actually doesn't necessarily value those things the same way.
What a great framework for us. Let me ask you to get a little more specific. As I said, you've been in Jesuit and Catholic higher education. How has the Catholic tradition, the Catholic community, frankly, higher education, is there examples of how we've lifted up this idea of the common good, and where have we failed to lift it up? Where have we become a part of the problem?
Well, I guess I would argue that probably since the 1980s, this country has become much more driven by a notion of, free markets, you know, individuals having the ability to kind of make choices and decisions for themselves. And we've started to believe that, market outcomes for individuals equate to their value in society. So if you have been very successful as a participant in the free market, you have in some ways, you're better, and other people should emulate you. We don't do well with concepts like weakness or need. So when we see people who are weak or needy, we sometimes seem to assume that, maybe there's something wrong with them. It's probably their fault. We have a lot of trouble recognizing systemic failures and how systemic failures might actually contribute to the fact that not everyone is getting their fair share and not getting justice. And I think for Catholics in the United States, because we're living in a society that is very individualistic, very market-driven, very libertarian, we sometimes do not do what we could be doing, and that's using our faith tradition to take critical distance and to step back from what we're seeing and to ask ourselves, maybe we should be questioning this, maybe we should be offering some alternative visions. I think it's infected higher education too in a way because, it's expensive, it's market driven, it's a lot harder for institutions to survive if they don't really participate in the kind of market framework for higher ed. And so if we're treating education as a commodity and we're living in a society where things are all being commodified, this notion of the common good, which requires sacrifice and sharing, becomes harder and harder for people to deal with. It's like cognitive dissonance. But we have to be willing to make sacrifices for one another. We have to be willing to share things. Otherwise,
Well, thank you. That's terrific. Marcy, you and I have been friends for a long time. I remember when we both worked with Monsignor Gino Baroni. You were in the White House on the Domestic Policy Council. You went to MIT to get an advanced degree, and instead you left MIT to go home to Toledo to run for Congress. And nobody gave you a chance. I gave you $25. I thought it was the least I could do.
We thank you for that.
Yeah. And you have become that kind of person that Vince talked about, who has an alternative vision and has used your faith to look at the world in a different way. I want to come to that. But first, I want to talk about the institution you're a part of, which seems to be a huge part of the problem. How did the Congress lose its sense of the common good? Why do our leaders seem to be so unwilling and incapable, some of them at least, to put aside narrow interests or powerful interests for the good of the whole? Robert Dole, we're all celebrating today for what he did to bring people together. He worked with you on. You took the lead on the World War II memorial with Senator Dole, and that took everybody working together. How has the Congress lost that capacity, and how could it recover it?
I think one of the things that's happened, John, is Americans don't have enough common experience working together. I think, as I said in my opening statement, there's a lot of media that creates these false images of who we are as a country. And I think people have gotten a little misfocused. I think the economy has caused families to split up. A lot of economic harm has been done during this period of time. We have examples of other prior periods where this happened as well. So we have to pick up the pieces. Here in the Congress, what's gone on with more money being required to put on the media to run for office, right? And more fragmentation in society, it's harder to reach people. And so it costs more money. And there's this, and Congress has been unable to pass any bill dealing with campaign finance reform. That's an hour discussion just on that. But it's a pity. It's a pity. I've tried. I won't even get into it. But both sides are afraid of the other side. And so why should it cost $44 million to get elected governor of Virginia? Why should a seat in the House of Representatives cost $15 million when you get paid $170,000 before taxes and you have to live in two places and take the airplane every week? I mean, the system is crazy, and that creates less time for members to actually work together. They're spending their time raising money. And also now with the manufactured gerrymandering, what's happened is both parties are making it almost impossible for a more moderate set of members to be elected. The edges are being promoted through the gerrymandering process, which is another our discussion. But I just wanted to say one thing about our mother's expression. Everything in life should have a center. The galaxy does, a flower does, and so should a family. And I think one of the question is, how do we define family? Does our family include our neighbors? And I think the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, has a very important question to ask. In my part of America, the Catholic Church is shutting parishes and outreach and housing programs in the heart of the inner cities. To me, that is a moral wrong. We have to think as Catholics how we connect back to the most needy, even if they're not Catholics. It doesn't matter. They're people, just like President Rougeau has said. And what has been very troubling to me is to see the Monsignor Gino Baroni's vision, right, of the valued variance of a common humanity that our church is building in the wealthy areas. It is not putting feeding kitchens in the heart of town or educational programs or making its educational content available. I think the media gives us the good part about it is we can do Zooms with kids where Father Greeley used to say, education the Catholic school system is the seventh sacrament. Well, let's act like it. Let's help the children and wherever we can reach them as Catholics. So I'm disappointed in many ways. I could tell you stories about my local bishops when they fought me on saving old churches in order to create senior housing and all. It's just unconscionable. And something's wrong with the plumbing at the top.
Well, I hear your frustration. I can feel your frustration. I suspect there was a different moment when Pope Francis came to the Congress. I think you were probably one of the few members in the hall who knew what he was talking about when he talked about Dorothy Day and Thomas Merton. You have brought your faith to Congress. He said that day, you are called to defend and preserve the dignity of your fellow citizens in the tireless and demanding pursuit of the common good. For this is the chief aim of all of politics. You've talked about the Congress, you've talked about media, you've talked about the church, our failures, our leaders' failures. What would it take to make the common good the center of politics again?
That's a really hard question. From a political standpoint, I think that we have to have corporate responsibility at a level that we're not seeing right now. We're seeing disinvestment. We're seeing people being spit out in my part of the country. This is part of the reason for the reaction of the public to voting for anybody that's left on the ticket, because they've had such gruel presented to them after a life of hard work to have your job moved abroad or moved to a place where people are paid penny wage labor is very disemboweling. It's very destructive of human life, really. And so first, I think we have to have a corporate responsibility that I don't see now. There are exceptions, but overall, there's something really wrong with Wall Street. There's something really wrong with the stock market and those companies. There's something really wrong with our tech companies when they create communities where the poor and the middle class can't survive, where a house in California costs $1,400,000 for your first house or more. A very uneven economy. We got to fix that. Also, I think we have to strengthen our voluntary institutions. This is something Catholics understand. Those have been weakened, including the family. The family is a voluntary institution. And we have to figure out, I'll tell you, in some of the places I represent, I've been thinking about building residential schools where the school building is there, but for children who are completely left to the streets. I really do think we need to think about a way of using our public and private dollars to let the children at least have a regular organized life during the week. And then whoever the custodial adult is in their lives, if there is one, to make sure they have 3 squares, they have study time. But what we see now is, I think, very perilous for American society. Very, very dangerous. If you talk to our juvenile judges, I would urge Georgetown University and Holy Cross and some of our leading scholarly institutions to really dig deep and look at what's happening to these children. If you give me 1 more minute. If you look at the grade schools in the communities that I represent, and I represent one of the poorest districts in America, and it's urban poor, all right? If you go to a school, a public school, any school really, in September, and there are 400 children, there will be 400 in May, but they're 400 different children. The movement of population because of the lack of housing and stability causes the children to be uprooted 2 or 3 times in their education. By the 3rd grade, we lose them. It's all across the country. Just look at the figures. Why can't we fix this? Why can't we fix this? And I think that it has to do with a reimagining of how education occurs. I just said to my pastor, Father, he's being moved to another church, which also has a school. Our grade school has our parish has a grade school, this other one. I said, Father, you ought to think about using Zoom and connecting these parish schools to one another through the Zoom. And then you ought to think about how to make that content available in other places. I think the Catholic community has a responsibility because of what it knows about education. So I'm putting the president and Tricia and all these, Matthew, all these experts on the line here. I think Georgetown has a responsibility. I think you could be a creative class that could move Catholic education. And frankly, in all the schools you operate around this country and churches, there ought to be signs along with the Jewish community and the Episcopalian community and the UCC. I could be a UCC. I really like them. The Methodists, I like them too. And think about a common theme that could be advertised on their marquees every month, a different one. How's this one? Parents, know where your children are. Adults, plant a tree with your child. Okay, I know I got to finish up. But those marquees, how about this one? Thou shalt not kill.
Wow.
Think about it. I think our experts in these universities could help us develop themes that could be carried across this country. Okay, Catholics, get ready. We need to do it.
Marcy, you always do it. We want to blame Congress and you say, what are you doing? It's classic. You've been doing it forever. The Washington Post had a story, I think it was called The Enduring Leadership of Marcy Kaptur. Talked about your dad's grocery store, you serving Toledo, and you challenging everybody, including your party. Matt, let's turn to you. Vincent is not the only one to grow up in a large Catholic family. I think you're one of 11 in Detroit. And he moved north and you moved south. You're a Texan through and through. You were a Democrat in the 90s, a Republican in the early 2000s. You helped elect a Republican president. Now you're a Democrat again. You worked for Representative Dick Gephardt, a colleague of Marcy's, Senator Lloyd Bentsen, and Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. 3 more different people in politics. It'd be hard to imagine, frankly. You helped get George Bush elected and broke with him publicly and courageously over the Iraq War and other issues. And now you're a former Republican running for lieutenant governor, which is a big job in Texas as a Democrat. Your campaign slogan is common sense, common decency for the common good. When I saw that, I said, we have to get Matt on one of our dialogues. You know politics really well. You know when it's broken and when it works. This seems broken. Marcy has talked about how society is broken. How is politics broken and where does the common good fit?
Well, thank you. And Marcy's right. I mean, I think it's so easy. There's no one fix for this, and there's no one place of responsibility for this. The responsibility falls on all of us in this. But I do think that that we have to hold our leaders really accountable. And I think we've stopped doing that. And there's many reasons for that. The incentives in my view right now are all wrong. All the incentives in politics are wrong. They actually go in the opposite direction of the common good in our current system. The structure that we have no longer produces an ability to get majority rule. I no longer think right now in America today we have an ability, because of our structural problems, to get to majority rule. That's why I always distinguish in our politics between where many leaders are, which I think it's very hard to get many leaders to the common good, and to where the public is, which is many public wants to get to the common good. It's interesting to me, we talk about polarization and division, but when you talk about the 5 or 6 key issues that are facing our society, there's almost universal agreement in the public about what to do. That doesn't exist in our leadership. And that is, in the people that hold office, not all people, but many of the people that hold office in this, we've produced a politics that's only interested in 50% plus one. And when you have a politics that's only interested in 50% plus one, it's very difficult to get to the common good in this, in where we are today. But I think this has been coming for years. And I would say, yes, the 80s, as Vincent said, was a beginning or at least a amplification of this. But the public receives messages from many leaders, both economically, financially, and politically, is they can have everything without a sacrifice. They can have whatever they want without having a sacrifice in this. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us in our politics. And I think that's how you speak to truth to power is obviously incredibly important. But one of the truths to power is telling people they can't have things without a sacrifice. You can't have something. And I think we do it with everything. We do it with programs. We say we can do this without raising taxes. That's basically saying there's no sacrifice needed. We can do this without it costing your family anything. That's saying you can have this without a sacrifice. And so to me, it's both a combination of our leaders structurally no longer being able to get to majority rule and reflecting the public, but it's also the public's responsibility, who day after day and year after year is being told you can get what you want without a sacrifice.
Lots of passion here in every place. Quick question and a quick answer on a really complicated question. You have said that you're running in part based on your own faith. What does faith have to do with politics? What does faith have to do with the common good? How does your faith lead you to run for office?
So my faith, as you know, I grew up Catholic, was an altar boy, did all that, studied and all of that. Have studied Thomas Merton. I'm very familiar with Dorothy Day. Thomas Aquinas was one of the first ones to talk about the common good. St. Augustine talked about the common good. The gospel is basically a message of the common good, right? And we have a politics today that basically says the end justifies the means, which I think has led us to where we are. The ends justify the means, which was Machiavelli's writing, but he didn't necessarily, that wasn't what he was trying to say. And we have a gospel that I follow that basically says the means justify the ends. And that to me is the means are more important in this. And so my faith to me led me there. My concern today is that the faith that gets talked about today is the exact opposite of what the call of my view of the Gospels is. The faith is using not to unite people, not to bring people to the table, and not to solve problems, and not to help others, but to divide people. And the people that talk about faith the most today, in my view, are some of the cruelest, most opposite of the common good of any people that you hear from.
Nobody's holding back today. Tricia, you actually have been studying faith and politics, what unites us and divides us. You're a sociologist. You've written about the Catholic community. You've written this amazing study on abortion. You're a leader in the sociology organizations focused on religion. You have done great work helping us try and understand that if we talk to each other, we in fact can understand each other. In your study on people's attitudes on abortion, the Wall Street Journal said, abortion is the issue that most epitomizes our us versus them political culture. But actually talking to people yields much more nuance. The Dobbs debate, which is overwhelming us at this point, demonstrates that. What does your research and writing tell us about how Americans think about this intensely personal, politically explosive issue of abortion? Is there any common ground? Is there any possibility of common good?
Well, abortion in the United States is common, but is not described by most Americans as a desirable good. And I don't say this under the banner of activism, but rather to more honestly acknowledge how we heard ordinary Americans themselves talk about abortion beyond the kind of narrow polls that we tend to look to. Regarding commonality, 1 in 4 US women will in their lifetimes experience an abortion before the age of 45. This national statistic bore out in the in-depth interview study that I led when we selected at random 217 Americans from across 6 regions of the United States. Despite not knowing in advance that the topic of the interview was abortion, 1 in 4 women among our study participants themselves disclosed a personal abortion experience, some of them telling about this experience for the first time. This included, for example, 74-year-old May, I'm using pseudonyms here, who had a coat hanger abortion at age 20, 28-year-old Jessica, who ended a pregnancy while married with 2 children because, quote, I knew I didn't have the means for another child. Taylor, whose mom encouraged her to choose abortion so that she wouldn't ruin her life while still in school, like her mom felt she had by having a child at 16. And April, pregnant despite being on birth control and taken aback by the obstacles she encountered upon trying to get an abortion. The commonality of this personal dimension to abortion isn't exclusive to women who have experienced it themselves. In fact, when we asked, a full 3/4 among our interviewees told us that they knew someone personally who had had an abortion, a sister, a spouse, a mother, a daughter, a neighbor, a coworker. And unlike the ways that we hear abortion framed in broader culture and politics, to everyday Americans, it's personal. And these kinds of personal stories really complicate these more elite, binary, and polarizing frames that are available to us through the media and politics to talk about abortion as either common or good. I also mentioned that Americans did not describe abortion as a desirable good, which is not to say that most Americans don't support legal access to abortion. Most do, even many Catholics, though this varies substantially by how often someone attends Mass. But even the most ardent legal supporters of abortion among our interviewees didn't celebrate it as something that they want or want more of. They used words like hard and sad, unexpected, unsupported, or describing circumstances that generated what felt like no choice. Ordinary Americans pair legal support for abortion often with phrases like, for example, but it's not Tylenol, or it shouldn't be used as birth control, or it shouldn't be used willy-nilly, or add caveats regarding strong discomfort with elective abortions late in a pregnancy. And I think that when we look to these more narrow and simplistic and symbolic representations of binary camps on the issue, we lose this complexity, we lose this messiness. And I would say also to end that we lose the ability to talk about what's behind the responses regarding a good society, a good life, a good government, and what it takes to be able to achieve those collective goals and common goods.
Thank you. You make the point that it's more personal than political for most of us. You have studied the Catholic community way beyond abortion, what our diversity and our divisions. What unites and divides Catholics, and what would an agenda for the common good look like?
Well, these days, political and ideological affiliations can be sometimes a better predictor of social attitudes than religion. We see how these work hand in hand among Catholics, political parties emerging as a sharp divider, such that people can be less likely to want to date or marry someone from another political party than they are to date and marry someone from their own religion. This is exacerbated in lots of ways for Catholics. We already heard a little bit about parishes, congregations. Organizationally, we see how parishes can exacerbate some of the divisions that already exist among Catholics in neighborhoods. We know that our neighborhoods are still very segregated in terms of race and economics. Our schools are too. We hear about the kind of gerrymandering and debates around where we draw lines. Catholics draw lines too. We have parish boundaries that sometimes codify these differences and divisions among Catholics. Catholics themselves also choose parishes. They like to go to places where they feel comfortable, which is a guise for oftentimes exacerbating divisions along the lines of economics and race and cutting apart our ability to have common and shared experiences or conversations across difference. This isn't always bad in the sense that the Catholic Church has a very strong ability to create places that feel like home and places of comfort. And yet there is a cost to that. And the cost can sometimes come around issues of common good and unity. And so I think there's an opportunity here to more honestly engage principles that do come from places like Catholic social teaching to ask, what does it look like to bring the notion of community back paired with the notion of individuality?
Thank you. Very helpful. I have lots more questions, but I have even more questions from our viewers. And let me pose a couple and combine the two. One says, how do I refute best someone's retort that the common good is not common to all? Whose common good is really the question. And then somebody else wrote in, how do you have a conversation with people who don't show your premises? How do you stand up for traditional values that you hold dear in a community that doesn't value those? Or how do you stand up against racism when those are fighting words? How to have constructive discussions with people who don't share your premises? How do you build the common good? And how do you get it owned by more than just yourself? Who wants to jump in on that? Vince, we haven't heard from you in a while. I'm going to volunteer you.
Well, I think we have to begin with a basic question of, do we want to live together in a democracy that is healthy and thriving and that values all of its members? Do we value what has been handed down to us, with lots of stress and struggle, but the concept of, a democratic republic? And do we value the fact that this is a diverse democratic republic and, that it is not based on some sort of ethnic tribal loyalty? It is open to all who share our values. And what to make that happen? So we've got to listen to one another. And I think the concept has come up. We've got to be willing to sacrifice. We're not all going to get everything we want. So whatever position you're coming into the conversation from, are you actually coming into a conversation to be open to the possibility that your mind may shift and may change? Or are you simply coming into the conversation to make sure that your view prevails? Because if it's not a dialogue where there's some possibility of movement, then we're going to be locked into this position that we're in now. So are we really interested in dialogue in terms of how we want to live together, which may mean that we are also going to be open to change? Because some things may have to change if we're going to live in the kind of republic that we say we want.
Let me turn to politics. We have 3 or 4 questions, and I'm going to come to Marcy first. One person says our politicians have stacked the deck by their spending, by the lobbyists, by the PACs, by the military contractors. Another says that gerrymandering, you talked about that, has made it more difficult to build up what is common. Another talked about the role of campaign finance and PACs and how special interests make demands on politicians. how have this, and Matthew talked about structural realities in politics, as did Vincent. What are the structural realities of politics? You mentioned campaign finance, Marcy. What gets in the way of the common good?
Oh, I think campaign finance reform is desperately needed, but this is a true story. Earlier in my career, I thought I would make a difference on that issue, and I realized I couldn't win in Washington, so I went to Iowa, and which is one of the early primary states. Ohio's at the end of the list. I mean, we get the candidates others select in the races, right? So I went to Iowa and I met with the top newspapers and with the politicians and so forth. I said, look, you could really be famous. I said, let's sign an agreement that when anybody wants to run for president and they come in here, they got to sign an agreement, make a promise to the people of Iowa that their first bill will be campaign finance reform and make it close to what the Canadians do. They actually put a limit. Corporations can't contribute. And nobody can give you more than $1,000. I said, that's fantastic. Okay. You know what they said to me in Iowa? The leaders of Iowa, they have about 5 or 6 congressional districts over there. So it's not a real big state. I thought we could win. They said, the people who ran hotels, well, would we get as many press in here? The Chamber of Commerce said, well, would we become less important in the primary season? Would we get less ads on the television? And I sat there and I thought, oh my goodness. But maybe I picked too big a state. So I went to New Hampshire, met with the muckety mucks in New Hampshire. And I said, look, you could make American history. You could change America because everybody comes to New Hampshire, right? Guess what? They got involved in an intellectual argument over which bill might be better, and they never came to a conclusion. So they didn't do anything either. So what I've run into in Washington is the coasts. I mean, I'm from the Midwest. Do I ever know this? They have the power because they have the richest people that live there. So if you're Wall Street, New York, or you're Beverly Hills, Texas is pretty big too, Matt, with the oil industry. Don't think it isn't oil and gas. Or I'm from Ohio. And so I've seen Republicans and Democrats be run over in this place from Ohio because we don't have as much money. So we have personally been burned, okay, over and over and over again. But when I went out to these other places and I thought, well, maybe I should move up the Ohio primary date and try to get it done in Ohio. But there isn't the will to do it, even at the grassroots.
Matt, let me come to you. What does money politics do to the common good?
Well, I mean, money to me in politics is an extension of what the money problem is in economics and finances, which is it becomes an end to itself. It becomes an end for itself because it achieves power or it achieves place, right? It achieves a power or place. And that's what politics has become. The end of many in politics is no longer, okay, we're in politics. They may start there, but they don't end there. The politics for many today is about a accumulation of power, as money is in the relation to that. And power and money in politics is now related to that. I agree with Marcy completely on this. But I actually think even if you did that, even if you dealt with the money, which we need to deal with, we have a serious structural problem in the country today, a serious structural problem in our democracy today. And I'll give you a perfect example. Texas gained more people in the last 10 years in the census than any other state. We've gained 4 million people. 95% of the people that were added in Texas in the last 10 years were people of color. 95% of the people that were added in the last 10 years were people of color. The districts that were just drawn here in Texas, there are now going to be less people of color districts than there was 10 years ago. So we added 95% of the 4 million were people of color, and now people of color are going to have less districts in the aftermath of this. And that, to me, if you want to know, I mean, we can have a debate and we can have a conversation about tax policy and education policy and all of that. But if the people sitting at the table no longer represent the country, which is where I think we are today, the people sitting at the table no longer are representative of our majority in this country. It's not only a problem in the House of Representatives and in state legislatures, but it's a problem in the United States Senate. Right now, 6 United States senators have the same population as 60 United States senators. 6 United States senators have the same population as 60. And if you think about that in the power structure, which means our United States Senate is no longer reflective of what the country is, our United States House of Representatives is no longer reflective of where the country is, and state legislative bodies are no longer. And so money, yes, but if we don't fix the structural problem, we can never get to the common good because we don't have a representative democracy.
I have to chime in here and say, in Ohio, this will take me 30 seconds. In the redraw for the next election, Ohio will lose 1 seat. We'll go from 16 to 15. We voted in our state for Obama twice and for Trump once, right? And then twice. So we go either way, right? So out of the 15 seats now, they have drawn through gerrymandering districts where we'll be lucky if my party gets 3 seats. It's likely to be 13 and 2 or 12 and 3. It is so out of whack. And if you see how they did that, it's even more troubling. But that issue is really, really important.
Wow. We've had 2 incredible examples of gerrymandering as political misuse of structures. Let me turn to Vincent and Tricia at the end here. The church has its own issues. We have a whole bunch of questions about the Catholic community. One says Pope Francis has given us a blueprint for the common good. Why haven't Catholic churches and institutions preached his message from the pulpit and the classrooms? And another one says, what about the bishops who foment division against Pope Francis and thwart dialogue? How do we work for the common good when we seem to be so divided ourselves? Let me lead off with Tricia and then Vince.
Well, clearly this is a real challenge. So I live currently in Knoxville, and I'm thinking especially of the oldest Catholic parish in Knoxville, the oldest building, which is Immaculate Conception, and it's up on a hill because, of course, the immigrant congregants put it up on the hill strategically. But I'm thinking of it now, especially because at some point in the history, with the train tracks going down below, they asked the church to incorporate into the steeple a place to put a clock so that everyone in the town could know what time it was. And when I think about the church's role here up on the hill, and this is a high role to hold in high regard and needs to be self-critical, but it is one in which the church has an opportunity to tell the time and to remind the town what time it is. This is common ground. This is a common good on which we can all move together, show up to the train at the right time, and move forward into what otherwise might be unknown.
Well, I think Pope Francis is signaling something to us that a lot of Catholics in this country, I think, are having a real difficult time hearing. And that's the church is a global faith, a global institution. And the lessons that Pope Francis is bringing to the table are the lessons that he learned coming out of the Latin American church. And those are lessons that I think often in the American context, given where we started this conversation about an understanding of the common good and the divisions that exist economically and socially and otherwise, those things there have been struggles in Latin America that have made those things very clear and often very painful and very tense. And he's speaking to us out of those experiences in ways that are challenging us to actually, as I said earlier, to be self-critical about the society in which we live and whether or not it is truly reflective of the kinds of values that our faith embraces, and whether or not we should be positioning ourselves to offer a critique and not to simply accept and then divide based on the political realities of the nation in which we live, and to think about our brothers and sisters in Christ around the world who are also calling out to us to understand their struggles and to integrate that into our understanding of what we should be valuing as Catholics. So, I think you're seeing something of a resistance and a power struggle around a lot of the issues we've talked about today. money, power, control, dominance. Who's going to win? We see a culture in transition in this country, a population in transition, and we see people doubling down on preventing those people from having access to power in the same way we've seen around the world in other contexts, in other countries. Pope Francis is speaking to us directly about those things. Are we reaching out to the marginalized? Are we thinking about their experience as we relate to our own? Do we want a country, a democracy that truly is embracing of all? And, the jury's still out.
We've had an incredible conversation and began with principle. We had passion, we had politics, we had analysis. Let's end with action. Very briefly, we have hundreds of people watching this. What is one thing we could do, each of us, to advance the common good? This is the 45 or 60-second version of your action plan. Let's begin with Matt.
I'll give two things very quick. Two things. First, when you're choosing leaders for whatever your organization is, where it's politically whatever, choose ones with integrity and choose ones that put the common good first, even if they're an opposite party of you, or even if they're an opposite person from you. Choose leaders first as the preeminent thing is ones with integrity and ones who put the common good first. Second, individually, go to discomfort. Go to places of discomfort, whether it's information or places or outside of where you live. Go to those places of discomfort. And in that, like Mother Teresa said, every single person should be finding their own Calcutta, finding your own Calcutta of where you can serve, what purpose you have, what mission it is, whether it's politics, a foundation, the church. Find your Calcutta.
Marcy, you're, for me, in many ways, the epitome of service. What that Matt talked about, what one thing, the short version, can someone do?
Well, this won't cost much money, but organize people from various faith expressions and encourage messages that you can commonly sign across a community that you live in every month or every 2 weeks that are biblically based or Torah based or in the Muslim faith, Quran based. Figure out ways of communicating message, because if you could see some of the vulgarities being posted in the communities that I represent, it would turn your stomach. All right. So we have to come back and use the power that we have. Also, politically, work at a precinct counting votes. Get yourself hired by your local board of elections. It'll be a long day, but you need to sacrifice, like Matt says. Find people to participate in that. Those would be two things that you can achieve.
Great. Vince, what should people do?
Well, I would piggyback on Matt. I think you need to go to discomfort. If it's a parish outside of your comfort zone, go to Mass there. Commit to doing it once in a while. Spend time in communities that you know little about. And that could be a great political action point, as Representative Kaptur was saying. Organize with people whose experience is different from yours. Pray with people whose experience is different from yours.
Tricia.
Set aside easy position labels and start asking and sharing the values that animate them.
Well, what a wonderful hour. What a challenging hour. Challenging in every way, personally, professionally, institutionally. Join me in thanking Tricia, Matthew, Marcy, and Vincent. I also want to thank my colleagues, Anna, I want to say Misla Gordon. She got married. Anna Gordon, who does so much of the work. Kim Daniels, who makes all this possible and helped us organize the questions. And all of you. This has been a long, tough year. This is the last dialogue we're probably going to do this calendar year. The whole thing was overshadowed by the pandemic. It began with insurrection, inauguration, racial reckoning, and now it ends with more worry about a new variant. It's been a long, tough year, but I think there is a hunger for what we've talked about today, the common good, Catholic social teaching. Since the pandemic began, We have done 40 of these online dialogues. I didn't know if anyone would come. We've had 150,000 people talk about faith in public life, talk about how Catholic social teaching matters, how we get to racial justice and environmental justice and economic justice, how we understand each other across boundaries of ideology and politics. We desperately hope we'll be in person in the new year. We'll try and figure out how to keep offering it online. But for now, I just want to thank these wonderful panelists, thank my colleagues, wish you a blessed Advent, a wonderful Christmas, and let's all hope and pray that we have a new year that is very much more about the common good we share than the divisions we fight over. Thank you very much.